Update Reporter is a higher order component that attaches to any component you want to track and takes over its shouldComponentUpdate method. It evaluates the previous and incoming prop and state values to see if the component needs to update, but also puts together a little report in the process to give me details about how the check went, especially what's causing the update. Let's see it in action. Yellow is the parent component, green is the child component. Watch what happens when I type into the input of the parent. Watch my log over here. This is my Update Reporter dev tool notifying me that two components have updated, both the parent and the child. When I notice this, there's an alarm bell because these components are set up so that the inputs of the parent aren't being passed down to the child. The child should not update from the inputs of the parent. So Update Reporter has discovered an unnecessary render, but also provides detailed reports about why the render occurred. If I expand this array, this is the child that was updated. It contains a label indicating that this component has updated, and this object here is the report. In the report, you can examine every parameter in both props and state. So for example, if I click here, I will get a list of all my props, and if I click on a specific parameter, I can see the previous and the incoming, the next value of this parameter. As you can see, they're both undefined, so my Update Reporter shows me that this passed the reference comparison or the equality check, and so it thinks that nothing has changed because it was undefined and it remained undefined, and so this won't cause an update. So from this parameter, React will not update my component. Conveniently, down here, this Update Causers section shows which specific parameters didn't pass the equality check or the reference comparison, and so which caused the update of the component. As you can see, it's inside of props. The submit and the clear parameters are the ones that have caused the update. So if we go into our props here, we can look and find the submit and clear parameters. So here's clear, here's submit. If we click on them to find out more, we see that it's a function. And in submit, we also see that it's a function. Now we have to check our code to see why these functions might be changing. Here is the submit and the clear methods in our parent component. Now let me scroll down to where they're being passed down to the child. And here's our child with all of these props being passed down to it. Here's the submit and the clear props. And as you can see, they're being bound. They're being bound because they have to use the this keyword to reference this parent component. Of course, this is our problem. Since the binding is happening inside the render method of the parent component, whenever the parent renders, this binding creates a new version of each function and passes it down. It doesn't simply reference the previously defined submit and clear methods. So as far as the child can tell, it's passed a new function every time the parent renders, and so it re-renders as well, even though it shouldn't. A quick Google search on how to handle this revealed a couple of solutions. React binding patterns, 5 approaches for handling this. So I read through this, and a couple of solutions were found, including to bind these methods inside the constructor function of the parent component, so they are bound only once and don't need to be bound each time the parent re-renders. But the more elegant and popular solution turned out to be to use arrow functions inside the body of this class. Arrow functions preserve their this keyword from the enclosing context without needing to bind. But using arrow functions inside of a class is a proposed syntax for creating class properties and is still in the proposal stage and not found in ES6. So this particular solution requires a specific Babel preset. Once the Babel preset is installed, the solution to this performance issue is as simple as this. You simply convert these into arrow functions, and you remove the binding, and voila. So let's see if this fixed our problem. If I type into the input now, you will see that only one component, the parent, has rendered. This simple solution can now be easily implemented across this project, but more importantly, it'll define how I write my React components from now on. With the help of this update reporter and an eye on performance, I've improved the way I write my React components to avoid unnecessary renders and be more performant by design. If anybody's curious, I just wanted to share how I implement my update reporter dev tool. It's actually very simple. It doesn't take a lot of code. At the bottom of each component, I use this helper I wrote called chain HOC, which chains together higher order components that I've previously defined and applies them to the component defined in this document. Higher order components, or HOCs, are a way to reuse code in components. So for example, my update reporter dev tool requires each component to use its should component update hook, which would get cumbersome if you actually had to assign this method on every component. Instead, I just have to pass the component, new challenge defined in this document, into my chain HOC helper when I'm exporting, and assign any previously defined HOCs in an array.